Good morning and welcome back to Reading Wikis for You, where we read the wiki articles for you. And today we are essentially doing our first request by looking at the Soul Drinkers chapter, a Space Marine faction within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So, as always, drop a comment down below. I absolutely do read them and absolutely want to hear what you want to hear next. So, with that out of the way, let's find out about the Soul Drinkers. The Soul Drinkers are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists, formerly considered a Renegade Chapter. Overview. The original Soul Drinkers did not fit the standard template of Excommunicata Tritoris. Unlike most Renegade Space Marines who have devoted themselves to the Chaos Gods, the Soul Drinkers despised the ruinous powers as much, if not more, than they hate the Imperium that cast them out. Instead, they developed an ideology that stated that the Imperium has betrayed everything the Emperor has stood for, so they still fought the powers of chaos even though they disagree with what the Imperium now stands for. Some within the chapter thought that the Imperium should be destroyed for the good of mankind. Since their refounding, the Soul Drinkers are considered an exemplar and heroic chapter lauded by the wider Imperium. Their Primaris members are ignorant of their chapter's storied history. History. Founding. The Soul Drinkers were created by Rogel Dorn during the second founding following the Horus Heresy. The chapter was formed primarily from the remaining fleet-based shock attack elements of the Imperial Fist Legion. At its founding, Dorn also presented the chapter with one of its oldest and most revered artifacts, a weapon known as the Soul Spear, as a symbol of purpose and as a sign that despite being split into separate chapters, all of the Imperial Fist successors were still united in spirit and brotherhood. M32, War of the Beast. 544 to 546 M32, the War of the Beast. The Soul Drinkers combined with the other Imperial Fist successor chapters into a legion as per the Last Wall Protocol at the behest of Courland. Chapter Master Euclidius was given a third of the combined fleet of the forces at Terra. During the conflict, the Soul Drinkers contributed a portion of their strength to rebuild the Imperial Fists. M41. A Soul Drinkers detachment led by Commander Kaon supported a large force of Imperial Guard against the Eldar on Quixian Obscura. Becoming Renegades. The Soul Spear. It began with an operation to obtain one of the chapter's lost relics, the Great Soul Spear, a weapon used by Rogel Dorn during the Great Crusade, from a criminal organization that had come to possess it. 3 companies of Marines, led by Commander Kaon, were called on by Adeptus Administratum to assault the base of operations of the cartel, located in orbit of the planet Laconia. Just as the 300 Soul Drinkers had taken the orbital defense platform where the relic was being held and were about to reclaim the spear, a detachment of Adeptus Mechanicus forces, supposedly there to support the Imperial effort to capture the platform, teleported into the vault that the spear was stored in and made off with the relic before the Soul Drinkers could react. The Soul Drinkers then fortified the platform and demanded the return of their relic, but it had already been passed along to another vessel that was en route to the Forge World of Coden Tertius. The Mechanicus then revealed a great siege cannon from their starship. The Soul Drinkers were forced to board and destroy the Mechanicus weapon before it could be used against them, slaying thousands of Tech Guard in the process. After taking out the weapon, the Soul Drinkers detonated explosives on the orbital platform, causing it to fall into Locania's atmosphere and burn up, before fleeing aboard their 2 strike cruisers. The Imperial forces present for the taking of the Star Fort pursued the Soul Drinkers in an operation that came to be known as the Laconia Persecution. Eventually, the Soul Drinkers made their stand in an asteroid-filled region called the Serbian Field. The Imperial fleet, unable to enter the field without sustaining massive casualties, attempted to blockade the region in order to starve the Soul Drinkers of supplies. After 5 months with seemingly no success, Lord Inquisitor Gorgosaurus of the Ordo Hereticus arrived to take charge of the situation. The Inquisition, caring not for the reasons why, saw only that the Soul Drinkers had attacked another Imperial institution and demanded they surrender themselves. After Sarpedon's refusal, the entire chapter was declared excommunicata tritoris. Soon after, the rest of the Soul Drinkers and their fleet arrived to extract the 2 beleaguered cruisers that they might answer for their actions to the chapter master, Gorgolion. First Chapter War. Gorgolion was obstinate and saw the soul drinkers of Sarpedon at fault and fought him for the fate of the chapter. Sarpedon emerged victorious thanks to a set of mutations that granted him the power to overcome Gorgolion, sparking a war within the chapter. Most of the novices and some of others refused to follow the mutant Sarpedon and took up arms and barricaded themselves throughout the fleet. It took Sarpedon and his forces, who counted most of the chapter's specialists among them, several months to root them out and kill them all. Under the sway of a demon prince, disillusioned by the Imperium, and unknowingly under the influence of a Tzeentch Daemon Prince, in the guise of an aspect of the Emperor, Sarpedon opted to keep his chapter renegade, scuttled the Soul Drinker fleet, and resettled the chapter into a space hulk they dubbed the Broken Back. Soon after, the Demon Prince Abraxas misled the Soul Drinkers into attacking one of his rivals, the Nurgle Demon Prince Vemeth. After slaying Vemeth, who took the form of a virus infesting several hundred ordinary people, Abraxas revealed his true nature. He handed Sarpedon the Soul Spear and offered the Soul Drinkers the chance to serve as his personal retinue of Chaos Space Marines. Though Sarpedon considered his options, he ultimately refused, attacking Abraxas and his demons and slaying them. The Empire of Tesseract. The heretic Tesseract, a life form produced by Adeptus Mechanicus experiments in human mutations on desolate Stratix Luminae, was carving a vast empire out of the Imperium of Man. His ability to project noxious, mind-controlling viruses and even raise the dead, with them won him godhood in the eyes of those he infected. He was able to claim several important Imperial worlds, including the Hives of Stratix, the Forge world of Saltian Anterior, and several others including Agri worlds and other strategic targets. One of these worlds was Stratix Luminae, a world where the old Soul Drinkers had once fought, granting Sarpedon a knowledge of the experiments carried out there. Still in the grips of the mutations brought on by Abraxas, Sarpedon believed this facility and its research represented the best chance of curing the chapter of those mutations. The Soul Drinkers sought out the surviving Mechanicus personnel from Stratix Luminae across several of the worlds under Tesseract's sway, all the while dodging the efforts of the Inquisitorial Task Force Thaddeus to track them down and bring them to justice, before finally collecting all the pieces of the puzzle that sent them to Stratix Luminae itself. Tesseract intervened personally, intentionally breaking up his flag battleship in orbit to rain debris and his undead followers down on the Soul Drinkers. Sarpedon was able to stun the powerful Tesseract long enough for Inquisitor Thaddeus to shoot him, and Sarpedon extinguished Tesseract's soul and brought about the ruination of his fledgling empire. Dealing with Telos. After the defeat of the heretic Tesseract, the Soul Drinkers were forced to flee Stratix Luminae, leaving several assault squads who were under Telos' command behind. Telos, who had bordered on cornate rage before his betrayal, quickly fell under the Blood God's influence, subverting his assault squads to the service of Khorne. Chapter Master Sarpedon quickly caught wind of this heresy by his battle brother and tracked Telos to Entimon IV, an Imperial world held by a mysterious alliance of Dark Eldar and Slaaneshi cultists. The Imperial Guard, with the assistance of the Crimson Fists, were at that moment trying to liberate the world. The Crimson Fist force was initially small, serving as a spearhead for the array of Imperial Guard regiments attempting to retake the capital city of Gravenhold. However, they quickly fell afoul of Telos' Soul Drinkers, clashing indecisively as the Fists took up overwatch positions in a cathedral. In the aftermath, recognizing the Chalice emblem and believing there's the entire Soul Drinkers chapter present, Crimson Fist Commander Reynes sent word of the Soul Drinkers' presence to Rin's world, who responded with the Fist's second company under Chaplain in Huaca, placing himself and the company under Reynes' command with orders to destroy the Soul Drinkers and bring back Chief Librarian Sarpedon's head. Upon their arrival in Entimon IV, Sarpedon's Soul Drinkers immediately began investigating the situation. Their method of infiltrating the world, hijacking a pair of landers from the Imperial Navy, quickly alerted the Crimson Fists as to their location. After securing the assistance of the armored fist units of the Fornux Lix Fire Drakes Regiment, the Crimson Fist dove deep into the city and fought the Soul Drinkers in a brutal brawl within the city's mercantile chamber. The Soul Drinkers pulled back after capturing the Fist's company standard and killing the company librarian. Throughout this fight, the Dark Eldar present on the world observed the Soul Drinkers fighting against the Loyalist forces. The intervention of the brainwashed slave army of the Dark Eldar deterred Fist's pursuit as the Soul Drinkers retreated beneath the city. They were quickly approached by the Dark Eldar, who, clearly bearing betrayal in mind, offered Sarpedon an alliance, which Sarpedon, also planning betrayal, accepted. Interested in nothing save finding Telos, Sarpedon split the Soul Drinkers into two parts to blunt the Imperial Guard for the Dark Eldar. All the while, the Soul Drinkers' scouts sought out Telos in the city. The scouts soon located Telos and his retinue as they butchered through a guard regiment, and Chaplain Iktinos and his flock were able to hold them in place long enough for Sarpedon to arrive and defeat Telos, collapsing a span of bridge on top of him. The Dark Eldar still benefited from this, buying time for a secret army of mutated human slaves to fully awaken beneath the city and begin a slaughter so great it would propel Endymion IV to the status of Demon World, one ruled by the Dark Eldar as a second Komarog. The Soul Drinkers would ultimately have the last laugh, using their scouts to trick the Crimson Fists into attacking the Dark Eldar stronghold on the world, slaying all the Xenos and preventing their plan from reaching fruition. Though prematurely stopped, the hole in reality leading into the warp tainted the world beyond hope, and the whole world was destroyed by Exterminatus. Second Chapter War. The Soul Drinkers found another chapter war brewing between Sarpedon and the new Sergeant Eumenes, taken from a planet that hated the Imperium, to restock the chapter. Eumenes found that the fight should be taken directly to the Emperor. He wanted to take out the Astronomicon and blot out the light that guides the Emperor's ships through the warp to start the Imperium over. Sarpedon, however, struck a new course for the chapter after being given advice from Chaplain Iktinos that a planet called Vanqualis was under attack from a horde of orcs and needed their protection. Afterwards, the Soul Drinkers would be able to benefit by taking on supplies for their new home, the Broken Back. Sarpedon led the Soul Drinkers through the jungles of Vanqualis to battle the orcs, but in his absence, Eumenes took control of the Broken Back and started a coup that included a great deal of the forces on the planet. After consolidating, Sarpedon's Soul Drinkers set out to take an old fortress from the rebels. Once there, Librarian Gresk warned Sarpedon to leave. Sarpedon did before Eumenes bombarded the land surrounding the fortress from the Broken Back. The Howling Griffins chapter had sent 3 companies under Lord Librarian Mercano to the world to honor an old debt the chapter owed Vanqualis. The Griffins had also allowed Inquisitor Thaddeus, now disfavored within the Inquisition, to tag along on the suspicions of the Soul Drinkers' involvement. Though he realized that Mercano didn't comprehend what the Soul Drinkers really were, he could not convince him of this fact. Thaddeus tried to leave the strike cruiser and warned Sarpedon of the Griffins, but had to kill one of the Griffins in a close-quarters firefight before he could escape. Mercano and his Griffins landed shortly thereafter, and did battle with Sarpedon's group, while the traitors watched bemusedly from the sidelines. It was during this that Mercano killed Thaddeus for killing his battle brother. Aftermath. Sarpedon could not get off Vanqualis, and conceded to Eumenes' wishes. Eumenes became the new chapter master. Sarpedon led the loyal Soul Drinkers to Techmarine Ligris, loyal to Sarpedon, but was stuck on the Broken Back until Eumenes let him shuttle Sarpedon and his forces back to their ship in time to repel a boarding attack from the Howling Griffins. Sarpedon and Mercano engaged in a titanic psychic duel, tiring each other out until Eumenes struck down Mercano from behind and throwing Sarpedon in the brig. Sarpedon then attacked Psyker Leighton's scout Scamander in the Broken Back's brig, incapacitating him. Sarpedon then made his way to the bridge, where he duels Eumenes. Though Eumenes had both the Soul Spear and Mercano's Forcasax, Sarpedon impales him with his mutated legs and wins back the chapter he won from Gorgolon. Necrons. While fleeing from an Adeptus Mechanicus task force, the Soul Drinker's space hulk is severely damaged and low on fuel. Forced to run, the Soul Drinkers go deep into the veiled regions in search of fuel. They run into the Necrons on many worlds, all with signs of previous human settlement, but now infested with the undying Xenos. Eventually, they discover the last of the human worlds that the Necrons are still in the process of cleansing, and the Soul Drinkers make a deal with the survivors. They allow the humans time to retreat to their spacecraft while they hold the Necron forces off, in exchange for the Soul Drinkers receiving fuel. The Soul Drinkers hold out against the Necrons, and the human population reach their spaceport, but a Necron fleet arrives in-system, preventing them from leaving. The Adeptus Mechanicus fleet arrives shortly after, and the two fleets begin fighting against each other. It is immediately obvious that the Imperial forces would be destroyed, so they began a complex pattern of maneuvers to delay the inevitable. When the Soul Drinkers realized they could not beat the approaching Necron force on the ground and the Mechanicus would lose in space, Sarpedon offered an alliance with the Mechanicus. Chaplain Ictinos and his flock remained behind to help defend the spaceport and the surviving humans. It is revealed that his flock is loyal to his secret master as well and no longer consider themselves Soul Drinkers. Accepting the alliance, the Mechanicus and Soul Drinkers set off for the main Necron hub, planning to destroy the Necron Lord and leave the rest of the enemy forces leaderless. Arriving at the Tomb World, the Mechanicus crashed their ship into the planet and deployed alongside the Soul Drinker. A long bloody battle begins as they race to kill the Necron Lord before the Necron's superior numbers begin to change the odds. Finally, they arrive at the Necron Lord's location and Sarpedon duels with it and wins. However, in typical Necron fashion, it gets back up and begins crushing him to death. Only by the sacrifice of Techmarine Legis was the Lord defeated. Gathering his forces, Sarpedon led his remaining troops towards the crashed Adeptus Mechanicus ship where their promised transports were to be awaiting them. Instead, 3 Imperial Fists Thunderhawk gunships deployed upon the surface, while 20 Terminator armored elites teleport onto the planet, led by First Captain Darnath Lysander. He ordered the Soul Drinkers to surrender or be destroyed. Sarpedon replies with the challenge of a personal duel. Despite Sarpedon's warp-enhanced strength, he was tired from the earlier fighting and was swiftly beaten. The book ends with Sarpedon hoping that Luco follows his last order to surrender if he was beaten. Endgame. After their capture, the remaining Soul Drinkers were brought to trial on board the Phalanx, and a conclave of Imperial Fists Successor Chapters and other concerned parties gathered to pass judgment on them. During the trial, Commander Gethsemar and the Angels Sanguine stated that the sanguinary priests of his chapter had examined the gene seed of the Soul Drinkers as part of their research into the link between the gene seed and the related Primarch, and also to see if the chapter's fall was related to the corruption of the gene seed, and they discovered that Rogel Dorn is not the chapter's Primarch. During the subsequent trial, it was learned that Denathos was in fact still alive as a dreadnought, and had laid down the seeds of a chapter which would rebel against the Imperium, using the chaplaincy as his agents in his absence. Knowing that the Imperial Fists would try to claim authority over their supposed successor, Denathos had himself brought on board the Phalanx and freed by a cult he had seeded millennia earlier. Escape, Denathos used the Predator's Eye Warp Gate within the Phalanx to release a demon, which by chances was Abraxas. Denathos planned to have Abraxas bring the Imperium into a new Dark Age, believing that a stronger Imperium, which he would rule over, would emerge from the ashes. While Ictinos and his flock joined Dathanos, the majority of the surviving Soul Drinkers refused to be Dathanos' pawns, and joined the Imperial Fists in fighting off Abraxas' army and closing the Warp Gate. By the battle's end, Abraxas had been defeated by Captain Luco and Sarpedon and had destroyed Denathos' dreadnought, taking him prisoner. In the process, however, all the remaining Soul Drinkers except for Sarpedon, Denathos, Luco, and Gravus were killed. Luco, Gravus, Sarpedon chose to walk into the Warp Gate, with Sarpedon dragging a screaming Denathos with him, bringing an end to the Soul Drinkers chapter. Their ultimate fates are unknown. Now convinced that they were in fact loyal servants of the Emperor, the Imperial Fists inscribed a column on the Phalanx's Apothecarion with the names of the fallen Soul Drinkers, holding them as worthy and honorable brothers in death. Despite the Imperial Fists' recognition of the Soul Drinkers' ultimate loyalty, the chapter still presented an awkward legacy to the Imperium. As a result, the Inquisition suppressed information on the Soul Drinkers and ensured that the chapter was mostly forgotten over the following time. Refounding. In the age of the Dark Imperium, the Soul Drinkers were refounded by order of Robert Guilliman, formed by Primaris Space Marines, and took part in the Indomitus Crusade. The new chapter had almost no knowledge of their predecessor, but its members initially believed their origins to be illustrious and honorable. The new chapter, eager to prove worthy of its name, scored a much-needed victory in the Keprian Reclamation. However, the Soul Drinkers once again earned the ire of the Inquisition in the process, and learned that the original Soul Drinkers had been deliberately forgotten, causing its Marines to wonder about themselves and their heritage. Combat Doctrine. The combat philosophy of the Soul Drinkers is based in large part around the Catechisms Martial, a treatise on battle written by the warrior Danathos. Every Marine carries a copy of the tome with them. The chapter specialized in ship-to-ship and drop-pod assaults. Gene Seed and Culture. Original. The Soul Drinkers were initially founded as a chapter of Imperial Fists descent. By M32, their gene seed was presumably still pure enough to allow the chapter to help refounding its destroyed parent chapter. However, at some point between M32 and M41, something appears to have happened to the Soul Drinkers which drastically altered or completely replaced their gene seed, as if the chapter had been refounded despite the Imperium's lack of knowledge on such an event. Either way, their gene seed was no longer recognizable as belonging to the Sons of Dorn. However, it must be pointed out that the Great Scouring era Imperial Fist Legion absorbed the Thousand Sons' Fifth Fellowship. Such incidents could mean that already by the time of the Second Founding, not all Imperial Fists or their successors carried Dorn's gene seed. The gene seed of the refounded Soul Drinkers is unknown, but Inquisitor Satheno's comments suggest that they share the more recent heritage of the chapter, meaning they are not of Imperial Fist descent. The Marines of the Soul Drinkers possess an overactive homophagia organ. This results in the information gained by a Marine from consuming an enemy's flesh being delivered in a manner that is simultaneously more intense, but less precise than usual. The Soul Drinkers view this as an advantage as it enables them to maintain their spiritual purity despite their exposure to unclean thoughts and emotions. The actual process of consumption takes place as part of a ritual involving a small ceremony known as the Rites of the Libation, in which the ranking commander ingests the biological material from a golden chalice. The only words permitted to be spoken while this happens are, "Know your enemy." The Soul Drinkers believe that when one of their number dies, their soul will fight alongside the Emperor in the final great battle as part of a legion led by Rogel Dorn. In addition, every Marine in the chapter records an epic of his deeds, made up of moments judged worthy of recording. When a Marine dies, their last rites includes a recitation of their deeds and the reclaiming of their copy of the Catechisms Martial, which is transferred to a librarium aboard one of the chapter's vessels. Current. Since their refounding, the modern Soul Drinkers live in ignorance of their predecessors' history and culture. However, they still maintain the chapter's preference for fast-paced fleet engagements and rapid assaults. Chapter Elements. Known vessels. Upon discovering the space hulk known as Brokenback and making it their base of operations, the remaining vessels of the Soul Drinkers fleet were scuttled. Brokenback, space hulk that served as the chapter's fortress monastery after they turned renegade, scuttled. Sanctifier, former flagship of the chapter, lost in the warp with the Soul Spear on board circa M40. Carnivore, battle barge, scuttled. Glory, battle barge, flagship of the chapter M41, scuttled. Luctra, battle barge, scuttled. Mare Infernum, battle barge, scuttled. Animosity, interceptor cruiser, scuttled. Ferox, former strike cruiser, converted into a dark ship, destroyed in the aftermath of Sarpedon seizing control of the chapter. Gundog, strike cruiser, scuttled. Heavenblade, strike cruiser, sacrificed to escape the Serbian field blockade. Sanctifier's Son, strike cruiser, destroyed in the aftermath of Sarpedon seizing control of the chapter. Unendingly Just, strike cruiser, scuttled. Notable Soul Drinkers. Original, Euclidius, chapter master in 544 M32. Grigoras, member of the Death Watch in the War of the Beast in M32. Argarath, chapter master in M36. Danathos, philosopher, soldier, and dreadnought, wrote the Catechisms Martial, the standard all Soul Drinkers live by. Gorgolian, chapter master in M41, killed by Sarpedon in an honor duel. Chaon, commander, killed in the assault on the Van Scarvold Starfort. Sarpedon, former chapter master and chief librarian with a mutated arachnidive form, first to break ties with the Imperium. Telos, originally an assault squad sergeant, later degenerated into a raving psychopath turned to the veneration of Khorne, abandoned by the chapter. Ictinos, chaplain, master of sanctity for the entire chapter and only chaplain left, clearly has hidden motives and designs upon the Soul Drinkers. Fought Sarpedon during the Battle of Phalanx and was mentally shattered by the Hell and then ejected into space to die. Pallas, senior apothecary of the chapter, It was Pallas who halted the rampant mutations within the chapter, but had become disillusioned with Sarpedon's leadership and sided with Eumenes in the Second Chapter War, slain by Abraxas on the Phalanx. Caradon, captain of the old Soul Drinkers who supported Sarpedon's break with the Imperium, the Soul Drinkers' new master of novices. He was killed by his charges at the outset of the Second Chapter War, possessed one of the only suits of Terminator armor in the chapter. Eumenes, senior novice, a new Soul Drinker created after the Soul Drinkers split with the Imperium, disagreed with Sarpedon's leadership and revolted against the new chapter, sparking the Second Chapter War, killed by Sarpedon. Gravis, Assault Squad Sergeant, mutated right hand allows him to wield his power axe with ease, later promoted to captain, survived the Battle of the Phalanx and left with Luco through the Predator's eye, fate unknown. Luco, Tactical Squad Sergeant, utilizes a pair of lightning claws with built-in bolter in the right one. Promoted to captain following Endymion 4 and remains one of Sarpedon's most loyal supporters. Survived the Battle of the Phalanx and left with Gravis through the Predator's eye, fate unknown. Tyrandian, Librarian, able to project powerful lightning attacks, bolts of lightning. Slain during the Battle of the Phalanx after being devoured by a great unclean one, sacrificed himself to destroy the demon by unleashing his power from within it. Gresk, Librarian, able to quicken the reactions and movements of his battle brothers, quickening. Sided with Eumenes in the Second Chapter War, but was killed by Eumenes' forces after warning Sarpedon of an imminent orbital bombardment. Ligris, senior tech marine and very close with Sarpedon. Without Ligris, the Broken Back would not have been nearly as functional. He sacrificed himself to destroy the Necron Catan, who was in control of the Veiled region. Salk, Tactical Squad Sergeant, since Stratix Lumine. Fought on Gravenhold, Vanqualis, and Silaka, and on board the Phalanx, where he was killed by the Flock. Died in Sarpedon's arms. Scamander, Novice Librarian. Sided with Eumenes during the Second Chapter War, and was the only novice who remained with the chapter after the conflict. Apprenticed to Tyrandian and fought on Silaka against the Necrons. Killed during the Battle of the Phalanx by Captain Borganor of the Howling Griffins. Refounded. Kuya, Captain of the Refounded 3rd Company. Tiridates, Sergeant, 3rd Company. Freights, Intercessor Sergeant, 3rd Company. Sivon, Intercessor. Oxiath, Epistolary. Notes on Chapter Strength. The Soul Drinkers suffer heavy losses at several points in the series. After the First Chapter War and the Battle of Vemeth's planet, they number about 700. After the fighting on Stratix Lumine, they are down to about 450. Though they are able to swell their numbers by being able to take recruits again, they fall back down to 300 after the losses of Endymion 4 in the Second Chapter War. The exodus of most of Eumenes' traders at the end of that conflict dropped the number of Soul Drinkers to 250. By the time they struck down the Necrons within the Veiled regions, there were scarcely 100 Marines left. All were captured by the Imperial Fists at the end of Hellforged. Through the events of Phalanx, their numbers dwindled due to infighting and attrition to 0. Recently, however, in the Age of the Dark Imperium, the Soul Drinkers were refounded and had an influx of Primaris Space Marine recruits. See also Renegade Space Marines chapters, Space Marines Forces, and Soul Drinkers, the novel series. All right, and this pulls, here's the list of the novels in which this pulls from. The Soul Drinkers Omnibus, consisting of Soul Drinker, the Bleeding Chalice, and Crimson Tears, Chapter War, Hellforged, Phalanx, The Last Son of Dorn, Shadow of Ulanor, Traitor by Deed, Campaigns of the Age of Darkness, The Siege of Chthonia, Soul Drinkers Redemption, and The Bleeding Chalice. All right. That was interesting. That's a chapter I've never heard of. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Do you want to hear about more chapters? Coming up next week, we're going to be talking about Conrad Kurz and continuing with our Primarchs. But, as always, put a comment down below, and I'd absolutely love to see what you want to hear next. So, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.